Hello and welcome to episode 46 of Let Them Eat Cake. I am Jack. My co-host today is John, and today we will be interviewing Sonja, an Oklahoma-based anarchist, activist, and organizer, who tells us about life as a street medic, explains how organizing works in practice, and all the way to LGBT concerns in the state, as well as expanding on the Next Benedict situation and Shia Raychek, aka Libs of TikTok. But before this interview, we have some headlines for you. Okay, headlines. Spain first. So on Sunday, the 12th of May, we saw the Catalan regional elections take place across the region. Historically, the politics of the region have been rather complicated, but basically all you need to know is the pro-independence party has had the president for the last two elections. This year, the Socialists won the presidency with 42 seats, up from 33, with the Independence Party going from 33 to 20 seats, and Together for Catalonia, which is another party, going from 32 to 35 seats. It has been theorized that the recent economic upturn has reduced the appetite for pro-independence sentiment to the point that this could be the end for the modern push for independence. This will be the first time in 4 decades that the nationalists have not been able to form a majority, but the socialists will still have to compromise with the Independence Party to form a coalition.
Catalan independence movement is something that, because I love me autonomous movements that I've covered for a while, and the events that are going on there, and the economic downturn that came from the EU, like Greece was falling off the map not too long ago. Spain also was hit really hard. So the conservatives being in power, it was kind of like a fringe thing that happened, kind of like how Donald Trump just came out of nowhere and it threw a wrench into everything, right? So they're kind of like in their post-Trump phase now, that it's kind of a return to normalcy phase, because the Independence Party in Catalan aren't the ones who have the majority in those Catalan elections. So it's more going back to like how it used to be in Spain. Also, it's at the same time, they have a whole corruption scandal going on with, I'm not sure if it's president or prime minister, but whoever gets the votes in the parliament guy, the socialist, right? So like his wife like embezzled money and shit like that. And so they're like, so it's just like we have Goldbar Menendez, where he's like, it's only my wife who did something wrong, not me. It's totally fine for her to do it. The Supreme Court justice, my wife hung that flag.
Yeah, it is a bit like that.
Yeah.
So
I'd say that's the summary, as it's a return to normalcy.
Okay.
The independence movement is probably not going to go much further for a while.
In Georgia, we've seen a slew of protests over the last few weeks due to a proposed implementation of a Russian-style anti-foreign agents bill, which would see any NGO or media outlet labeled as a foreign agent if they get more than 20% of their funding from overseas. They will also be required to register with the state as a foreign agent. My question here is whether funding from Russia has to be classified as a foreign agent as well.
Well, here's the thing.
I would be very interested to ask that question of somebody.
Here's the thing. Russia can't afford to be doing that. Now, well, people always ask, it's like, this sounds like just a transparency law. I don't understand. I wish we could get somebody from Georgia on, but I guess just because they're so CIA controlled, they won't talk to us. The one part of it, not just like being a copy of Russian style laws that have been used in the past, one side of it is that, believe it or not, the people in Georgia who are protesting are pro-EU. So when you get more than 20% of funding from that country, you basically enter into like almost a criminal class. They make you do a bunch of different things, right? It's like it basically suppresses people from getting more than 20% of their funding, effectively just basically killing NGOs in general.
Yeah.
And so NGOs are obviously something that are used for soft power all over the place. But the thing is, it's just like Euromaidan, where the goal was to get to the EU. Like, these people want to be in the EU, so you just remember that, Jack, next time you say, like, why would Northern Ireland want to stay in the EU? There's people dying to be in that shit.
This law passed on Tuesday, the 14th of May, with a vote of 83 to 30. This bill will now progress to the country's president, who has said she will veto it. This won't matter, as the same party that passed the bill can hold another vote to override that veto. So it seems kind of pointless to even have this power. Yeah, as I said, ultimately it feels hopeless for the Georgian people and comes as a shock considering the social move towards the European Union as of late. Expect a lot of Russian propaganda claiming these protests are Western backed, as the Georgian Rose Revolution was, of course, as we all know, that it was a joke. There is an upcoming election, but an apparent lack of opposition within the country makes the Georgian Dream Party, the party who passed this bill, unlikely to be unseated. So over to the Pacific now. French colonial rule has resulted in another uprising, this time in New Caledonia, situated off the eastern coast of Australia and north of New Zealand. The unrest and violence was spurred on when French Parliament voted in favour of a bill allowing French settlers of New Caledonia, who've lived there for over 10 years, to vote in the country. The concern is that this dilution of the native Kanak population's voting power will reduce their hard power in their own country. This vote in the French mainland did not go over well in New Caledonia, which is supposed to be autonomous from France and their only autonomous territory, with others only being semi-autonomous or considered extensions of France
Yeah, I was about to say,
themselves.
or basically considered extensions of France.
Yeah, so this meddling with New Caledonian laws understandably resulted in unrest, as they were told that it's autonomous. In response to the unrest, French authorities have launched upwards of 1,500 cops in order to regain control over the island, potentially sending more from France with Macron, who is coming to New Caledonia. When asked, the High Commissioner of the Republic of New Caledonia, Louis Lefranc, said Republican order will be re-established whatever the cost, which juxtaposes the positions of the presidents of the French overseas territories, which, as I mentioned before, is considered legally France. They all denounced this action in an open letter.
Just like with the foreign agents bill, there are some surface level takes that I think you could produce from this. Like, wait, so if they've been there for 10 years, why shouldn't they have the right to vote, right? Because most people don't think about active colonialism, of course.
Yes.
So
it's like these people come from France to make money, to have dominance over these people in this area.
And this place has a lot of fucking money.
It's nickel, I think, is what.
So that's what that's what brought everyone to the island in the first place, is the nickel deposits.
Yeah.
There's parties like this in a lot of places, especially people suffering from colonialism. Like there's like a more extreme party in South Africa than the ANC, which has been like Mandela's party.
Always will be.
Right. So, I think you should be suspicious of parties that literally call themselves, they try to flip it around like you won't notice by calling it social nationals, but guess what? So I think it's kind of funny that the party who's leading the protest are National Socialists, and the nationalism they have is not mythic nationalism. It is more of like unified the island regions, like, not just our island, more of a greater Albania type of nationalism is kind of what they have. Then there's this weird connection with Azerbaijan that the social nationalists assure us is not happening, even though they're carrying Azerbaijan flags in these protests and stuff. And that's where I think things get really weird, because France just claims, technically without any evidence, that Azerbaijan is involved, while they go and wave Azerbaijan flags and have Azerbaijan shirts. So, and it's not like the first, like, I don't know, like, why is Azerbaijan doing this to France? Why is Azerbaijan funding this territory all the way over here?
Yeah.
They're just they're hard to read, because, as last I checked, all they did was kill Armenians. It makes me suspicious when Azerbaijan pops up places.
Okay, so to Israel, the IDF has resumed raids and strikes in the north of Gaza, with renewed claims that Hamas has returned and recollected their forces in the north. This is because what Israel does is they go in, decimate the area, Hamas just hides, then they move on. You need
4 AC-130 gunships circling the area to prevent regrouping.
So it's basically, the IDF will go in, fuck shit up, leave, and wonder why.
It's almost like it's
more
intentional.
People, like, exactly. So it's kind of interesting that these actions, and then they're like, oh, well, look at what you made us do, sort of thing. It's literal physical gaslighting. They're creating a power vacuum by annihilating the literal social structures, and then being like, "Look at all the problems." This is what they're doing. So this follows operations into towns on the outskirts of Rafah, which is now escalated, I believe, into actual deployments into the city of Rafah, where the majority of Gaza's displaced population is and is now no longer. This comes as after the US feigned care by blocking an arms shipment, then immediately sending $1 billion worth of arms after.
Why is that? Because I think this is the greater context as well, is that this report, and like anyone who's watched us long enough knows my history with the bombing those 40 kids in Yemen, and how that changed a lot of things for me, and how I looked at the US, and the fact that Trump actually scaled back shit, that we were able to put enough pressure onto the weapons in Saudi Arabia from that Trump listened, of all people. That's for some stuff I kind of liked Trump on foreign policy.
Yeah.
You know,
Not
on other stuff, no. But
Yeah.
the report, the investigation that they're doing, oh my God, please just don't, like, you got to just be upfront. Just classify the investigation and delay its release, until after the shit's over. If you think it's going to be like a political bombshell that's going to stop weapons to Israel, right? I don't know. It's just the United States said that going into Rafah was going to be a red line unless they saw a cohesive plan.
There is no cohesive plan.
And Blinken has continuously said, we have not. He's like, have you seen that plan? We have not. That's what he says every time.
Yeah.
Right? Now they're softening their dialogue, and the theory is it's because Israel has done these limited contingent operations in Rafah. Mm-hmm. They haven't, even though they showed like amassing vehicles to like do an assault. So the U.S. softened their rhetoric because I guess Israel didn't genocide too hard on these last recent operations.
Yeah, so, and an update to this is the International Criminal Court has applied for arrest warrants for 2 Israeli leaders and 3 Hamas leaders, including Netanyahu. Naturally, Netanyahu has refuted and denounced the ICC like an actual child.
It would be like if George Bush got charged for stuff after 9/11, is what he said.
Yeah, exactly. Hilarious. So this is continuing to attempt to justify his assault on the Palestinians and outright genocide pretty much in Gaza, as clearly the ICC thinks so. The US, as is expected, also denounced the ICC, but also added threatening to sanction the ICC as well. So that's pretty fun.
But anyway, with the package being, they delayed certain weapons that are stuff that would have not been useful for Rafah, that they couldn't be trusted with, right?
Yeah.
We continued selling weapons to Saudi Arabia right when we fucking banned certain bombs from them getting. We scaled back arms to Saudi Arabia, and certain types of arms that have been used in unethical ways specifically. We scaled back those. But guess what? We still have them as a number 1 arms buyer. So to think that, like, oh, it's just fake, the United States sent things over, like, sure, it's going to help Biden anyway, because now he can't be criticized for not loving Israel enough.
Mm-hmm.
The arms are going to go no matter what. It's just the U.S. gets to choose what they're going to get, just like how they fucked over Ukraine by not giving them more Patriot batteries in this last package. Yep. More Common America L.
Oh, talking about Ukraine, Sergei Shoigu has been reassigned from defense minister and replaced by a civilian, former deputy prime minister Andrei Belousov, who specializes in economics.
Wow, a regular Ashraf Ghani. Wow, there's an economist who wrote a book on how to develop nations. So you put him in charge of a, high command in the Afghan government, and then gave him the presidency, and he fucked everything up. Wow, crazy.
Putin announced that he decided that it was time for a civilian to run the Defense Department instead of a military man. Shoigu has been moved to the role of secretary of the Security Council.
Can we talk about how that makes no sense? It's like putting your dog in charge of your Air Force.
Yeah.
Air Marshal Frou-Frou.
This replaced incumbent Secretary Nikolai Patrushev. Shoigu will also acquire roles overseeing Russia's war machine. Gerasimov and Lavrov, 2 other notable heads of the Russian government, will remain in their positions for now. To Chad, Chadian elections concluded with ex-presidents Ex-President Idris Deby's son, Mohammed Idris Deby, announced as the victor of the May 6th elections. Despite controversy in the lead-up, Prime Minister, I don't know how to say this name, the main challenger of Deby Jr., announced himself the winner in an announcement made on Facebook, which is very funny. On February 28th, security forces murdered the leader of the Socialist Party Without Borders, Yaya Dillo. No investigation has been done into the murder. Violence broke out, killing a man attempting to vote in the southern city of Mandu, while celebratory gunfire after voting had been completed ended up killing 9 people, as reported by local sources.
This sounds like a cool country to me. I think in America, after you vote, they should let you just blast a 50 cal into the air. You know how many people would come to vote just to shoot a big ass gun?
Probably a lot.
Yeah. Look,
Every
if the
vote gets you 5
Republicans were
seconds of
actually
a
a real
minigun.
party and not obstructionist, I could get somebody on this platform and show that it's a valid way to get voters to come out.
It's actually, I actually agree. You get 5-second press of a minigun.
I think the 50 cal shooting in the air, and then
Dangerous.
after it lands on like some old lady.
But yeah, so this theoretically legitimizes the military junta into a civilian government, specifically in the eyes of the international community, and probably more importantly, ECOWAS.
Well, I mean, sure, everyone's like, okay, pal, but yeah, I would say ECOWAS is the important thing here, and also because with the entire Sahelian region, I mean, even Senegal is looking to move closer to the, I guess we'll call it the Mali Federation at this point.
Yes.
So we reported on Senegal a little bit in the past on their elections, so we'll see what happens there. But I think what's important with Chad is that in Niger, Americans are pulling out because of the coup, and they're going to Chad, most likely. Nobody has confirmed this, but this is what a lot of analysts are saying, is that they'll probably be in Chad, right, to do counter-insurgency things, which means that they're going to have to spend more money on gas when they fly their planes a little bit further. But the Deby Senior, he was a famous African dictator. So I think Deby was number 3 behind this guy. So and then Cameroon is the highest now.
Okay. Where was he? Equatorial Guinea.
Yeah, this is Equatorial Guinea. Okay. So
interesting.
And so Deby is a very notorious leader. This dude fought Gaddafi. So Chadian politician, military officer, served as the 6th president of Chad from 1991 to 2021. So this guy literally died on the front lines of battle, which is crazy that a world leader to die in a war like that. Because he I don't know if he was there seeing the troops or he actually fought for to give them motivation. Yeah, he actually won his term.
I support this action.
And then
all world leaders should be on the front line. They should put world leaders on the front line. Because if they want to wage the war, they should be on the front line.
So this is so funny. So there's anti-election protests. So to act like he is the true leader, instead of giving a victory speech, he went to command the Chadian soldiers in person on the front lines fighting the northern rebel incursion. So it was by this people called FACT, Front for Change and Concord in Chad. So it's funny because everyone says that he was killed by ISIS, but he wasn't. Really? He was not killed by ISIS. I'm still on this. I didn't flip the thing. Anyway, I don't know how much that'll include, but anyway, Deby was a notorious leader. And the fact that he died on the front line is very interesting. So the prime minister, who is his opposition figure, who claimed that he won, not Deby, he has now resigned. Well, probably ousted, forced to resign or something, and he'll probably turn up dead in a ditch.
North Macedonia has elected its first female president after the former leading party, the Social Democratic Union, suffered a devastating defeat in the May 8th election. Gordana Siljanovska, a university professor and opposition presidential candidate for right-wing VMRO DPMNE party, I only made the acronyms because the actual pronunciation of this is impossible, who won 65% of the vote, with the incumbent winning only 29%. In Parliament, this party-led coalition won 43% of the 43% of the vote and 58 of 120 Parliament seats, giving them just short of a majority. Despite just falling short of this sees a shift in North Macedonian politics. The coalition government taking power allegedly breaks a deal with Bulgaria that was conditional for North Macedonia's ascension to the European Union. Yet another hurdle that Macedonia has had to overcome in its long journey to the EU membership, which could explain the shift from the socialists to the right wing. The most recent Bulgarian deal requires North Macedonia to mention Bulgarians living within the country explicitly within the North Macedonian constitution. So they want them to change the constitution to recognize Bulgarians in the country, and this party opposes this concession, and it's creating issues. This is my opinion, but I think it's kind of ridiculous that Bulgaria wants this country to change its constitution just to enter the EU.
Only reason I would argue for it is if it mentions other groups besides Bulgarians.
It's just Bulgarians.
Yeah. So
from what I can find, it's just Bulgarians.
So while I agree it's bullshit, I think that a reasonable compromise was just list them all. Just list all the groups and just list them all, and then be like, and everyone else.
Yeah, you know? Just being like people, North Macedonians, and everybody else.
Yeah,
not that hard.
Well, no, I mean like all the ethnic groups, they would go down the line, you know,
in the Constitution.
Yeah, and then just in case more arrive in the future, and they go and anyone else at the end.
Yeah, so that's all for the general sort of May summary of news stories, I guess. Now to the main story, which is the Internal Displacement Monitoring Centres yearly index on the number of internally displaced peoples.
Yeah, it's worse than ever.
Yeah, exactly. 4.8 million more IDPs in than 2022, with 75.9
I just remember like being blown away by how bad it was with Syria and at the height of it.
Yeah. So this is going to be a massive info dump, but it's the key information that I could get from the actual index.
Skip to this time code. I'm not putting the time code in.
So, 46% of the global IDPs, 34.8 million of them, were found in sub-Saharan Africa, with Sudan accounting for 26% of them, roughly 9 million. The DRC accounted for 19.3%, which is 7 million people. The report says that together they accounted for almost half of all conflict displacements worldwide.
So we see all these people saying, along with Free Palestine, is free Sudan and free the Congo. And from my investigations, I got to give it to Democracy Now! Because she interviewed a guy who actually was giving accurate information on why free Congo is important and talking about the M23 rebels, which we've covered extensively. Go watch past episodes, you know. But the displacement is coming from groups like the M20, specifically them. There's others, but specifically M23, which is backed by Rwanda, and Rwanda is backed by the United States. So if you're going to implicate the United States in like supporting something that's oppressing the Congo, that's what I guess you would say. But from what I've seen, everyone I asked where I go, what do you mean free the Congo? What's going on there? None of them even know what M23 is. They've never mentioned it to me. I've only seen it from that Democracy Now! Interview.
That's very funny.
So they're just supporting something because they're told to, is basically what I've gathered. So I don't think they even know the stats on how bad the displacement is in the Congo. There's also conflict minerals, but that's another thing. And then Sudan, obviously, we've been reporting on Sudan since the outbreak. And we said from the start that it's going to be debilitating with displacement, right? And just, you know, like the capital city of Khartoum, right? Just because of, it's like in the Afghan war when the resistance fighters were left to their own devices and shelled their own capital to pieces, you know? Like, of course, because I talk about how it's like people think of Sudan as they don't realize that like, how developed it is. Like the Darfur region is very underdeveloped, but like the main city, it's like a modern city. Like anyone would be able to be comfortable there.
Yeah, like every time I see a video and it's on stream of Sudan, I'm like, hey, roads.
Yeah, 'cause that's the
And it's
joke
like
because people
Khartoum is
don't
like a
think that that's
very
it's because of
civilized,
South Sudan.
massive
South
city.
Sudan has an
Yes.
extreme underdevelopment, so people think that's what
Yeah.
Sudan is, even though it's more like Egypt.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
just imagine a war that debilitating. Egypt's even worse, like because the
Mhm.
chiral population density, because it's all the density in Egypt is insane. Just
Yeah.
imagine how debilitating displacement would be if a war took place in Egypt,
In Cairo
in
specifically, it
Cairo.
would be
Yeah.
nuts. Yeah. So this figure is actually up 4% from 2022, as I said, and is up for the 5th year in a row. So we're doing pretty well. North Africa and the Middle East accounted for 20%, 15.3 million of IDPs, up from 12.8 million in 2022. This is the 4th increase in a row for this region. The major jump in 2023 is due to the full-scale assault launched by Israel into Gaza following the genocidal acts committed by Hamas on October 7th, accounting for 3.4 million of its 15.3 million displaced people. This is going to get worse as Israel continues its genocide and as America continues to facilitate it. This number this year's number will likely be higher for this area, as well as obviously
Yeah, because
natural disasters.
this is only the end of 23 where this report comes
Yes.
from.
Yeah. So Syria still accounts for 7.3 million of the total 15.3 million displaced peoples in this area specifically, showing that Assad's control continues to screw over the country and is leading to further suffering,
Also, I
um,
should say that even with
among
Syria
many other factors.
specifically, there's a lot of issues with external people. So, like
Mm,
Lebanon, it's a mess right now with Syrian
yeah.
refugees because people don't want the refugees there. And
Hmm.
Turkey, it's also pretty bad, but Lebanon specifically is really bad right now
Yeah, they
with
don't
how they're
want the
treating them.
Syrians.
Yeah.
And then this is followed closely by Yemen with 4.5 million still. East Asia and the Pacific saw 4.2 million people displaced, 2.9 million from conflict, 1.2 million from disasters. The overwhelming majority of this number is Myanmar, accounting for nearly all conflict displacements, with 2.6 million, with the smallest numbers in Philippines, Papua New Guinea, and Indonesia. This highlights the issue of climate change in the area. And this is as we transition from like the Middle East and North Africa, where most of the conflict is, we'll see the displacement numbers transition from conflict to natural disaster. This highlights the issue of climate change in the area and what we're going to see in the coming years and how much risk countries like China are in, as they have the second highest number of internally displaced peoples in East Asia with 640,000 people, which doesn't seem like a lot, but that area only has
There's more people
4.2
there,
million.
you know.
It's an eighth of all the displaced people
Yeah. But there's just a
in
more
East
people in
Asia.
China, so it's
Yeah, so
and
we're
also
we're
as you're
naturally
about to
gonna
say,
well, we also realistically these numbers may be lesser than like most numbers. I take most numbers from China as a low ball.
well, a lot of these are probably way higher.
Yeah. So most of China's issue just comes down to, as you've said, their biomes, just the sheer
Well,
amount of
I didn't say
biomes
that. I
they
was going
have.
to let you add to it because you are.
Well,
I
yeah,
saw it written. So
yeah, yeah, yeah,
the population and just how many biomes there are. The river floodplain as well
yeah.
from the
So
Yellow
there's
River.
just a lot of stuff in that country that can displace people,
Yeah,
and the
statistically,
government.
it's statistically you're most likely to die from a natural disaster in
Mm,
China, just
yeah,
because of how big and how many biomes there are.
yeah, and they have that government. You think you're getting help? It's not happening. Afghanistan continues to top the IDP numbers in South Asia with a total of 5.7 of 8.2 million total displaced peoples. The nation accounts for 4.2 million of 5.3 million conflict displacements and 1.5 of 2.9 million disaster displacements. This further reinforces that what we've been saying for a long time here about Afghanistan, that it's one of the countries most at risk of climate change, and nobody really gives a single thought of it. And especially during the El Nino system we're currently in, Afghanistan is going to get hit pretty hard. So we'll see what happens there, but it's not looking good so far. I think Pakistan was also pretty up there with
Pakistan and Afghanistan are both pretty much the highest.
And finally, in Central Asia, we've seen a total of 7.2 million displacements, with Ukraine obviously accounting for most of them, with 3.7 million. We also see Turkey with about 2 million, with 822,000 being disasters. I'm not sure where these displacements come from. I'm assuming they're Kurds.
Well, there was that earthquake that almost lost
No,
Erdogan the
not the
election.
disasters. I'm talking the 2 million. So a million, the million other displaced people, because there's 822,000 and then around, I think it was like 1.96 million total. So I'm just wondering where that million people displaced comes from, and I feel like it might be southern Turkey. But Azerbaijan also accounted for some of this displacement, likely due to Nagorno-Karabakh that happened, I think, later last year. This is actually down from 2022, but up from 2021. So silver linings, I guess. I don't know, but yeah. So that's all the key information that I could glean from. Although I don't think I covered
because,
Europe.
Are you talking about Nagorno-Karabakh? There's been less violence this year. The main war was the year before, so that's why it's down.
Yeah. So, but just
like how
general,
Ethiopia was way higher in the past years. Now Sudan is the high one.
Yeah. But yeah, so that's it for that. I guess we can link the actual index if people want to look it up. But it's the Internal Displacement Monitoring Center. It's their index, so just look them up. We should be good. And do you want to throw it?
Yeah. So now we're gonna do a pickup, because when we did the interview today, basically the news of Next Benedict's death came out that night, right after we finished recording. So we wanted to update and talk about that beforehand, because it's like something that's clearly missing from the interview when we're talking about Oklahoma and Shia Raychek and things that happened there. So it's like, it shows how accurate and how well that, knowledgeable and wise she actually is that she's highlighting this as a specific thing that's a problem in the state, and boom, right when we finish recording, she's proven right.
Yeah.
So
it's rough, but clearly we were right on it. This is something that needed to be spoken about. So
I think I should. I still am editing it because we do so much streaming now. I'm so behind, but I wish I could say we already have the next episode on Patreon right now. It's not gonna take me long to get up there, but it will be up this week. So
yeah. Hopefully we can increase number.
But that episode is going to be really cool because we're talking to somebody who unironically supports the Taliban, and they're not like a whack job, and they have valid reasons for why they support them and things like that. Because it would be very hard to find somebody who has like valid reasons for supporting Putin nowadays, right? Like I feel like you could find some Russians in power long enough where you can really be.
Yeah, I feel like you could find some Russians who could probably justify it, like nothing's bad happened to them, sort of they've just kept their head down kind of thing.
Mm-hmm, maybe.
But like that would
I could definitely see it with like people like Erdogan, But there's very few. There's very few, I think, that are like this, where the person is actually very pragmatic and actually is a normal person. They're not a like gaslit psychopath. They acknowledge, like, there's nothing we disagree on, like events. Like we agree on all the defense. It's going to be a very cool one, so keep an eye out for that. And here's the fantastic episode about that will teach you how to organize and all this stuff. Hopefully inspire you to get out and change your community. When we recorded, it was literally the day that Next Benedict died, I believe.
That was the day that we recorded. Later that night was when the news came out about it.
Okay.
I think it was like a week before, but the news about it came out that night after we recorded. That was the first time that I started seeing the news saying that they had died.
Anyway, now I can put that at the beginning when we kind of cut into it, because their death was basically ruled nobody's fault. Yeah. What did they say specifically? Because even I was saying, like, even if we believe the medical report, there's also things here like, what about how a head injury amplifies this medication? Like, how does a head injury affect things? You know, like there was too many conclusions, because I think it was something like antidepressants and Benadryl is what they determined was the cause of death.
Yeah, so Prozac and Benadryl, which Prozac, it's impossible to kill yourself on Prozac. There's no way. Just for antidepressants, they're specifically made so that you cannot kill yourself by taking your antidepressant. That's the way that it goes. They were going to go back to the doctor the next day, and then they died. So it wasn't that they died in their sleep. They woke up, and then but you know, as I had talked about previously, when you have a head injury and a brain injury, it takes anywhere from 24 to 48 hours to build up enough pressure in the brain to cause death. And this is why when we say that if someone has a head injury, that you don't leave them alone for the first 24, 48 hours, that you watch them like a hawk, because the pressure will slowly build and build and build, and you won't know it until, 12, 24, 48 hours later, and they die.
Because from what we were aware of, because I know that there's a lot of semi-accurate bad reporting with a lot of inflections, like they're implying things that we don't actually know, right? But as far as we're aware, we know that their head was repeatedly bashed into the ground, I believe is the wording that was used.
For 2 minutes. For 2 minutes.
Yeah.
And that is a long fight. Yeah, as a person who is trained for hand-to-hand, 2 minutes is a long time.
Yeah, I don't think I've seen a fight at school that lasted that long.
Yeah, it's a long time for it to be happening. And it was both. There was two. It was Nex and their friend that was there. So we do have.
And we know the time because of the cameras, and the cameras have time codes. And we can see the exit and enter.
So we have a first-hand account that we could go and ask about. Whether this person wants to give that account or not, I'm not sure. We also have, obviously, the account from the people who did the attack, but they're not going to tell the truth, are they? And the school's not going to tell the truth.
The authorities and the police and the school is withholding the identities of those students. Of course, they're still children.
I mean, they're minors.
So it's like they have to dance around that. Then you've also got the issue that you were talking about before with the medical examiners and the causes of death. And we've seen just in the last couple of years multiple instances of cases, as you were saying, like George Floyd. I was going to point to Tortuguita in the Stop Cop City thing, where the Georgia State Police pretty much just executed them.
Yeah,
they ruled it. They planted a gun allegedly, and had I think it was like 60 bullet wounds in the body. Something like that.
And they did a ballistic analysis that his hands were up.
Yeah,
all of this stuff, and the report still comes out like this, and people believe the police report because they got it out first, because the people who were closest to them,
the police lie to us.
Yeah, and the people closest to them did get it out. They just don't have big enough voices, and this is where the issue comes.
With human psychology, whatever information someone hears first, they hold very tightly to that information, and then even if new facts come in, they just disregard it because it creates that weird belief disconfirmation paradox where you just can't accept new information. And the cops know that, and they take advantage of it. They have the media right there with their microphones ready to hear what the cops say, and people believe them, even though we're shown day after day that we definitely should not believe the police, because they're legally allowed to lie to us in order to get whatever they want to accomplish.
So can you?
But I was mentioning that other student. I can't remember it's Reggie something. I think he was a young black kid who his death was ruled a suicide, but he was found rolled up in a gym mat, vertical, head down, feet up, and that was ruled a suicide. And he had contusions all over. Same as Nex. Nex had contusions all over head and body, and those things get disregarded.
So why? I would ask why, but I think we all know why.
I mean, go ahead, ask why, just because it's rhetorical.
Sure. Okay. Why do they do this? What is their purpose of covering up stuff like this?
In the case of Next, the narrative that these people here in the the Oklahoma area, I live 20 minutes away from where Next was killed. It was really intense. The local authorities and the police and our anti-trans folks, including Kaya Rychek, it's important to them to continue keeping the narrative that trans people are the bad ones, that trans people are the ones that are like out to get people, the ones that are violent, the ones that are trying to do evil. And this doesn't match their narrative. And so to continue that narrative, they have to cover up all of the anti-trans violence that happens, whether that's direct violence like we saw with Next, or whether that's just harassment and abuse of trans people until they just eventually do take their own lives, which again is a deliberate action by these anti-trans bigots, these transphobes.
Yeah, because we see them, they always say join the whatever percent as a sort
then
of
you
way
just
to get around
respond with follow your
too.
leader and reference Hitler.
Yeah.
But with this case specifically, there's the initial police body cam. Because of how the events turned out, the cop essentially says because you splashed them with water, they're allowed to kill you.
Yeah. The self-defense laws in the southern states is very interesting, especially Texas and Oklahoma, especially when it comes to trans people. We still have trans panic laws that defend somebody if they thought that some woman was hot and then found out that she's trans, and then this guy like kills her. He's most of the time going to get off on the trans panic defense laws. It's absolutely set up here as an active like a new form of social murder, really.
I don't imagine a lot of cases where somebody's death is justified because they splashed somebody with water.
It's not justified, but it's a way for police and for the school system to shirk responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
And if
it's victim blaming.
If it's a well-loved person that gets killed, they're going to do everything that they can to try to like seek justice. And if it's someone that they want to, conveniently pretend that it was just like some kind of an accident, or that it was justified, or that it didn't happen, or that they killed themselves, then that's the story, that's the narrative that they're going to give out. And it's unfortunate and embarrassing that people believe it without question.
Yeah. Okay. So any last things?
I just look that there's a Queensland still has gay panic legal.
Mm-mm.
It says exceptional circumstances, but what the fuck does that mean? So that's pretty cool. Go Queensland. Fucking hell. But it's not a surprise considering we only legalized gay marriage in 2018 in Australia, something like that.
It was around that time for us too. It wasn't
so,
that much
so fucking late.
Earlier for us.
No, I think it was a couple years earlier.
No, it was during the Obama admin, so that would be like 2010 to 2016.
Yeah. Makes sense.
Something like that. Anyway.
Were there any updates on the next thing other than it being ignored and basically
ruled a suicide and successfully covered up?
There haven't been updates that I know of since then. As you know, I've also been kind of out of the game a little bit.
We can transition into that from this as well.
Sure, because I don't know of any other updates after that. It just we know what happened, and there's really not much we can do. So yeah, but then I ended up being out of the game for about the last 6 weeks up until very recently.
You had lymphoma, correct?
I had been having a lot of symptoms for a long time and getting a lot worse and having more pain, more nausea, losing weight. I've lost about over 100 pounds now. And, doctors had been ignoring it. And I ended up in the ER back to back. And then eventually they just did like a full body scan, and found that I had lymphoma. They did a bunch of biopsies, and it's an extremely rare form of lymphoma. It's like a B-cell, non-Hodgkin's.
Yeah, I remember trying to look it up and being like, I've never heard of this type of thing.
So fewer than 250 people get it any given year in the US.
Oh my God.
And it's almost unheard of in anyone under 60. The average age is 70. Obviously, I'm not 70. And so it's just, it took so long for them to even, come up with the diagnosis. But yeah, I was in a hospital in the cancer ward for like 2 weeks until they were finally able to get me stabilized where my heart wasn't going into AFib because I was super malnourished from not being able to eat. That I was just like near seizures. My heart was just like doing weird stuff, and they were able to get the pain under control. And now I'm doing outpatient chemo, but I've been having to beg the community to donate money because this is a massive amount of, this is a very expensive illness to have.
Right there at the bottom on the banner.
Yeah.
So
yes, please.
So the link will also be below for people. So I think we're good. Thank you so much for taking time to come talk.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks for inviting me on.
I'm sure if we have any subjects that come up revolving around your expertise, we'll probably reach out again.
All right.
Regular contact in general. Yeah.
We have a weapon more powerful than the British Empire, and that weapon is our refusal to bow to any order but our own, any institution but our own.
Because they close those things, that's why we have a homeless problem. They say it all the time, like Reagan.
No, we have a homeless problem because we live in a capitalist system. We have a homeless problem because capitalism needs there to be homeless people who are visible and treated poorly, so that there's an unspoken threat of, if you don't do what we say.
We have a weapon more powerful than the British Empire, and that weapon is our refusal to bow to any order but our own, any institution but our own.
All right, hey, I'm Sonja. I am an organizer and an activist living in Tulsa, Oklahoma, USA. I'm also an educator, and I'm here to talk to y'all.
What kind of activism?
I've done a lot of different kinds of activism. I've been active for 13, 14 years in the city that I lived before this. It was very politically active, and so I spent a lot of time organizing protests and other kinds of demonstrations and events in that city. And since I've come here, I've been more into the community organizing aspect of it and education.
So what's it like down there? Honestly, how southern states tend to get a bad rap. So how do you find it?
I'm glad you mentioned that. So before living in Oklahoma, I lived in Texas, and I was in Austin and in Dallas. And I think a lot of people think of, the South as just a bunch of racist white people, but we actually have more diversity in the South than the North has. We're just gerrymandered to hell, and so we actually have a lot of people who believe very strongly in leftist politics, radical left politics, but they can't really do much about it in the electoral area, because no matter how many people vote, it's not really going to swing things because of the district. But I found that when I lived in Texas, we were extremely active. We had extremely passionate people, and a lot of eyes were on us. And I think that the South is fertile organizing ground and activism ground. And I love to be able to show people that this is like working class areas where, like, people down here hate the government way more, way more than people in the North. And we have fertile ground for organizing and radicalizing these people, and we're doing it.
What do you mean by radicalizing?
I mean by finding people who believe that we are just going to be able to vote our way out of the problems that we have, and teaching them that we need to act as a community and come together, not necessarily unionizing, but unions are also very important, but building another system outside of government to get shit done and to get done what we need, and I think of
I was going to say that practice and theory is fine and all, but I think, like you said, the biggest issue here is the gerrymandering.
I pretty much stay out of electoral. I'm more about like direct action.
That's what, and that's what I wanted to lead into with the gerrymandering being like so against you. Is like it's almost like you need to go another way instead of the voting blocks.
Yeah. And the politicians, they don't do what their constituents want because they know that that this is their career, and so they're more concerned with their career. They're not even in it for the right reasons. And these people, representative democracy, they don't even know who the fuck I am. So how are they representing my interests? They're not. They're representing the interests of the people that are putting money in their pockets, which isn't me. But yeah, I believe firmly in direct democracy, that I am the best representative for my own interests. And in the words of Graeber, I'm no longer begging the government to dig a well. I'm going to dig the well myself and tell them fuck you when they try to stop me.
So what are the biggest challenges besides the gerrymandering? Like, if that just defeats the electoral process, what are the biggest challenges in your like day-to-day political organizing?
That's the thing. I don't do any electoral organizing. Like, that's not my end of it.
So that's what I'm saying is the other side. Since you're not doing that, what challenges do you face in your regular organizing that you do?
So I would say like a big challenge is that the government actually doesn't want us to do anything. So a lot of times when I'm out with my org, we've had several instances where like a sheriff was just parked and watching what we're doing. And I just know that they're like going back and reporting home like, yeah, they're out here again giving free stuff to homeless people. Oh no, it's awful. Like, what are they reporting on anyway? Or, we'll be out doing our land rematriation project, and there's really nothing bad that we're doing, but they're going to try at every turn. When I was helping organize a tent camp for some of our homeless neighbors in Dallas, we had a gentleman who offered his lot of land that he had a house on, and it was very secluded. It wasn't within eyesight of anyone. We had it set up with safety measures. We had showers up. We were going out there doing medic work. We were bringing food, water, doing trash hauls, and laundry. And the city came and they told the owner of the land, you can't have camping on this land, and we're going to charge you $1,000 a day until you like disband it and nobody's on your property anymore. And so they didn't have anywhere else to go but to the streets and where they would be seen. And of course, then cops will continue to sweep those campsites as well. And so everything that we do, that we set up, the government does not like that, and they will send their little goon squads to come and tear it down. I think that's the biggest issue. The other one is just capacity, because we're all so exhausted from our regular day-to-day jobs that, by the end of the day, we have very little energy, mental and physical energy to go into organizing and to, going out to our land and working the land and building these community gardens and things like that. So capacity is a big issue.
How do you solve the capacity issue?
So one of the ways that we try to work around the capacity issue is, for one, we try to expand the number of people that we have and then balance that against how many projects we're actively doing. We've got a free store, we've got like a food pantry, we've got 2 different reading groups, we've got our land project, and it's a lot for the number of people that we have. But we also have one of my roles is a capacity monitor. So I basically keep a spreadsheet and checking in with people on a red, yellow, green basis, like, what's your capacity? Are you green? Can you take on this task and go and check in on this time bank thing and see what that's what's going on with that? Or they'll say, no, I'm at yellow capacity, like I don't think I can take on anymore. Or if they say red, my capacity is at red, like then that's the point where they feel like they're getting close to burnout and they need to take a break. So really we just have to pace ourselves, and at this point what we're really pushing for is more expansion.
As a producer and stuff, just like I'm like just picturing Excel sheets in my head and turning the blocks different colors right now.
That's
like,
exactly
that's
what
such a good that's actually really good, like to like
that's
allow
exactly what it
your
is. It's
staff to like grade themselves.
And the tabs, everybody's names. So I've got what projects they're active in, and then the tabs with their names on it are colored as far as like
we're
yellow.
totally
It's
gonna
like,
we're totally gonna do
Bob's
this.
got green. I'll give him, I'll ask him if he can handle this task.
Yeah, definitely gonna do that. Because like when we expand and stuff, especially, it's gonna be harder and harder to keep up.
Well, and the thing is that if you don't know someone's capacity, the people that we organize are extremely passionate and devoted and dedicated. And if you don't know their capacity and you just say like you need them to do something, a lot of times they'll just take it on and try to ignore the fact that they're nearing burnout. And then eventually they do burn out, and then they just can't do anything for months.
Mm-hmm.
But if you can see like somebody has more availability than somebody else, then we try to lean more on them, and it just really helps balance things. And so that's not even based on like everyone has an equal workload. It's like, okay, this person is like a single parent with 3 kids, and so their capacity is very limited. And this other person is like dual income, no kids, and so they've got high capacity. And so we're able to, it's almost like the from each according to their ability kind of thing.
Is literally what I was thinking. Some commie bullshit.
I'm an absolute theory nerd. I was raised by I was raised communally by a group of Marxist feminist women.
Really?
Yeah.
That's very interesting. That's very, very interesting. So I guess that's the root of all this then.
Yeah, I think my experience is pretty unique, and most people are not raised by a commune of Marxist feminist women activists, and they were all very active in civil rights. And so I was just kind of put into that from as early as I can remember. And my bio mom, she worked for nonprofit her whole career, and I've never worked in for-profit either. And so that was the basis, except I went way farther than they ever did, and now I'm a social anarchist.
Yeah, it's fun to update and modernize ideas, Anyway,
Absolutely.
anyway, one of the conversations we had in the past is like because you do a lot of work with the homeless, and I wanted to just get your opinion on these updated terms like houseless and things like that, and how they make you feel.
I have actually asked the people that I work with, and I said, what do you think about this new terminology? Because I had made a post saying, hey, can you donate like either clothes or food or, whatever kind of goods for our homeless neighbors? And I call them our neighbors because they are our neighbors. They're literally part of our community. And I said, and I got these comments saying, they're not homeless. They're people experiencing houselessness. And
I haven't heard it extended to that. That's so snobby.
Everybody that I asked was just like, what the fuck does that even mean? And so the opinion that I've gotten is that it's intended to make liberals feel less bad about the fact that there are people out there who are homeless, and that they think it's ridiculous to focus on the language. And for myself, as far as my like multiple identities go, like I'm disabled. I'm disabled. I'm not a person with a disability, and I'm autistic. I'm not a person living with autism any more than you're a person living with neurotypicalism. I think a lot of this is intended to soften the grit of the experience that people have.
It's outdated.
I just think it's to make people feel better. People who aren't even experiencing it to feel better. Another one that I've heard is, it's not it's not poor people. They're underrepresented, or what was it? Underserved. And I looked up the definition of underserved. It means like they're not being given enough help. And so when I think about that, I'm like, it's not that they're not receiving enough help. They're oppressed. So you don't get to take everything from someone and then deliberate about them getting 1% of that back and then saying, oh, they're not getting enough help. No, you're just robbing them. You're just robbing them. It's not that they're not getting enough help. You just took everything from them.
So I assume basically what you do is help mitigate the help that they don't get.
Yes. So I believe in creating dual power, which is to have a system outside of the existing system that fills in where the existing system fails. So I don't know if you know this, but Oklahoma is rated 48th out of 50 in education. We have very low education rates, less than 5th grade reading levels here. We have tremendous poverty and wealth gaps because we've got people who are extremely wealthy from oil. There's a lot of oil here. And then we've got people who are extremely poor living paycheck to paycheck and going from like, trying to get food stamps and then having to go and supplement that with going to food banks. And so we try to fill in the gaps and also do that while radicalizing people and saying like, we should be providing for each other. We should be providing for ourselves and not, letting the government take everything from us and then determine how much of it they give back to us.
So
45th in education. Okay. Yeah. 43rd in health.
This is also 2019, but it was the best graphic I found quickly. So
yes. Yeah. Yeah. And we also live under these incredibly draconian laws of, government's so small, it fits right inside my uterus and
here we go.
I get to decide what I do with my own
body. It's been slightly better. It moved up in, let me see, I'm just comparing the two. It moved up one in health, family and community. Oh yeah. No, it did move down in family. And then it moved up in economics a little. To get whatever this index is.
The woman who lives of TikTok, Chaya.
Oh my god. Yeah, Chaya Raychick. Oh my god. She's like,
she just got hired on. She just got hired on here with the Oklahoma Board of Education. So she is now. Yeah, that is just to give you an idea of how we're doing here education-wise. But yes, as far as healthcare as well, I try to fill in a lot of those gaps myself. We do have a number of medics here who try to help people out when they aren't able to get, medical help at a doctor's office.
So we've done a bit of stuff with the Cop City stuff, and I found out that it's illegal to feed people for free in Atlanta. Yeah. Is that like a common thing? Is that the case in Oklahoma? Is that different depending on states? What's the deal with this?
So it actually is depending on city. So most of the time it's a city ordinance that if you are giving people food, that you have to have all these like crazy licenses, and then they want thousands of dollars for those licenses, even though it's like, I'm just giving somebody a sandwich. And in the city, when I was in Austin and in Dallas, both of those had the same laws where you can't give people food. And so when the cops would come and mess with us, because we weren't with an org that had like a banner saying, food not bombs, which is a great org, we would just say, oh, we're just having a personal cookout, or other times I would just do these like rogue drive-by food drop-offs to like the existing tent camps that we had set up around the city. But you just kind of have to be slick about it, get in, drop off, get out. And it's the same thing with harm reduction work, because only recently did they stop criminalizing being in possession of a needle, of a hypodermic needle, if you didn't have a prescription for some diabetes medication or something.
That is insane.
Yeah.
So can we get into safe drugs from this? Going off of this, let's just get just since we're talking about clean needles, let's just go right into safe drugs from here.
Sure. All right. So I feel very strongly about harm reduction work, and that's something that I started doing when I lived in Austin. We I think 7 or 8 years ago, I formed a street medic group there. And part of what we did was we had a harm reduction project where we would go out into the community and seek out places where we knew people would be using drugs. So we would find not just, homeless folks in the encampments, but also like raves, colleges, sex workers, and we would find them and do both drug harm reduction and sexual health harm reduction. So part of that is we had a needle exchange program where, we will give you clean needles. Please, put dirty needles in that box over there. Or actually, it was like a shark's bin. And providing people with Narcan. Got cases and cases of this shit that we passed out. So this is the nasal spray version, and we would distribute those to people. Clean needles, information about, if you snort drugs, you need to be using a clean straw because you can absolutely get hepatitis from using sharing a straw, and then giving them a little card with information for free testing for any bloodborne pathogens that they could go and get tested for free. And then, sexual health supplies, external and internal condoms, and again, more education. And I tracked, my other day job has been statistical analysis after I left nursing. And so I looked at the numbers, and our opiate death numbers dropped by 23% in the year after we started our harm reduction program and started distributing clean needles and Narcan.
It's very interesting that this is something that's, people are required to do in the States, and it's not something the government's just like, hey, maybe we should stop people contracting diseases.
No, they would much prefer to criminalize it. They would much prefer to criminalize it. Yeah. We still have the 14th Amendment that says that it's legal that slavery is legal, but only for the government and only if it's people that have broken arbitrary laws. And so if we criminalize people who have become addicted to substances that they're just trying to get through this capitalist hellscape, and we criminalize them and put them into prisons and put them into labor, now we've got free slave labor for the state. And so it actually works very well in the government's favor to criminalize substance abuse. And that this is, we're talking about a system that introduced us to opiates in the first place. Mm-hmm. We called it an opiate crisis. Of course, it wasn't a public health crisis when there was a crack epidemic. That was just treated entirely different than now. It's considered a public health concern, but it's still criminalized.
Yeah.
You're 23% more likely to die of an overdose when you get released from jail than you are at any other time. Yes.
Is that because they've been clean, come out, and then go too hard, and it just okay.
They don't know their limits anymore.
Okay.
And they go back to it because there's no rehab. There's no rehab in jail or prison. And so they get out. The only people they know are the friends that they used to use with, and they don't really know their limits anymore. And so people will OD and sometimes die as well.
Okay. It's a statistic I didn't know. That's disappointing. It's also very interesting because the US government keeps drugs illegal. Weed, I think, for the most part, federally is still on the same level as meth. Yeah.
Yeah, federally it's still a Schedule 1, I think. So federally, certain states have decriminalized it entirely. Certain states have legalized it, and of course, there's a difference between legalizing and criminalizing something. So here in Oklahoma, we have legalized medical marijuana, where you have to have a doctor's prescription for it, and then you have to pay a registration to get your license, and then you can go down to the dispensary and buy it. When I've been to Oregon, drugs is winning the war on drugs in Oregon, because I walked into a dispensary there and they didn't even ID me. They were just like, "What can I do for you today?" I was like, "Can I get a couple of pre-rolls?" They're like, "Here you go."
I support this.
And
because in Melbourne, the guy that just left office for Victoria, the leader, he opened up these drug centres, the safe injecting rooms is what I think he called them. And I'm not sure how much effect they had, but there was a lot of anger in Victoria about these things opening.
That's really
because
interesting.
it's very backwards.
Is Victoria also opposed to the safe drinking locations that y'all have there?
Safe
I
drinking?
think y'all call them bars.
Oh, bars.
How is it any different? How is it any different?
It's not.
You have a
It's not.
safe
It's
injection
not.
site where somebody will make sure that these people don't die, that they're using clean shit and not spreading hepatitis A, HIV.
Yeah. I mean, it's
But,
more. I
and
think
that's
it's
bad.
more the
If you go to a
community.
bar and drink in a bar in that setting, that's totally different. That's fine.
Yeah, and it's just up to the bartenders to monitor. And the bartenders aren't medically trained, but they've got their responsibility.
They're
Their
like,
responsible
They also
servicing
make a
alcohol.
profit.
You to go home.
Yeah.
I'm calling you a cab.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you're there and you don't have friends there, like I picked up a friend of mine. She went out to a bar for a concert, and I rocked up and her friends passed the fuck out. You know, like gone. And I'm just like, how is this any different? The ambulances come, they put her in recovery position. What's the difference here?
Right.
It's still a drug, and it's like, yeah, and they still have this this vehement opposition to marijuana, which doesn't make sense, right? I'm very much on the position that, if anything, psychedelics and marijuana should be recreationally available. The other stuff, you know, there's open to discussion. But at the same time, I don't think people should be criminalized for being drug addicts. It's a health
Medically
issue more than
speaking, alcohol is way, way worse for your health. It's a known carcinogenic. It absolutely destroys your liver. There are just thousands of contraindicated medications that you can't take with it. So, you know, you wake up with a hangover where there's still alcohol in your system. You take a Tylenol, you're wrecking your liver. You only get one of those. If you're lucky, you can, you know, try to get a liver from somebody else. But that's no fun. But you know, we don't really see that with cannabis. We don't really see that with psilocybin mushrooms. I'm not one to go out and say like, oh, it's a miracle cure for everything, but it's way less harmful to you than caffeine, than alcohol. I don't drink alcohol just because I know how much of a carcinogen it is, and I know how badly it wrecks your internal organs and literally pickles your brain. It changes your brain chemistry to make you more dependent and depressed when you don't have it. You get depressed and anxious when you don't have it. And so by all means, if you want to drink, that's fine. But to turn around and then shake your finger at somebody for smoking pot and eating mushrooms, that's absurd to me.
Such a crazy thing. And it's all... this is one of my favorite stories, is that William Hearst is the reason this exists. All because he wanted to protect his paper industry. Fuck yourself.
I mean, it's also related to the different communities and stuff. So like, because like there's a lot of links to banning of marijuana being linked to like the Latin American community.
Yes. Seriously, the U.S. government, this was right around the jazz era, and everybody of every color skin loved jazz at the time. It was kind of, and what goes along well with jazz is weed, and so you know, the authorities kind of saw like, oh my God, they're doing jazz and smoking pot, and now they're realizing like that white people and black people and Hispanic people don't really have that great of a difference, and that they're like being friends now. We have to put a stop to this. This is not good for business. And there's been released documentation of that observation being made by lawmakers, specifically saying like it's causing, you know, white people and black people and Hispanic people to all hang out and make friends. This is not good. So
it's eroding society, white genocide. Well, I when I hear it, I think about it's more the jazz is the issue. They're like, whoa, this stuff makes people enjoy jazz. No, but a similar thing happens in the Harlem Renaissance, and I talk about the Harlem Renaissance a lot because it's also, it wasn't originally called that either. But the reason why they started having problems with it is because the music they were playing was attracting their white daughters to go hang out with black people. And they looked at them from their like apartment top where they're playing music and dancing in the street, and they were just so disgusted by it.
This was at a time when parents could have their daughter committed to an asylum for having sex with people of color.
Yeah, gotta love that. Good work, America.
Yay, it's great.
And then, like, speaking of, just because we touched on it, so like, what was the president that got rid of the asylums? So Reagan or Nixon? It was one of those two loony pots. I think it was Reagan, because they blame him for the homeless crisis because they say that so many homeless people have been.
But the problem there is that institutions didn't go away.
Well, that's what I wanted to ask you your opinion on them to begin with. Well, how do you think about them, like, looking back on how they were run, and like how do you think they should be like more implemented today and things like that?
The problem was involuntary commitment for people who were not a danger to themselves or other people. They didn't need to be medicated. They didn't need, they would have shock therapy as a form of punishment, and which can actually be used as a very powerful treatment for depression. I've done it. And my first career was working at a state psych hospital. And the problem is that anything that the government runs is going to be fucked up. And so these institutions still exist, but the laws where you can have people committed for, a wife who talks back too much, this is a time before women were even allowed to have credit cards without a husband. That didn't happen until 1973. And so they were just basically like anyone who was non-compliant with the status quo was getting put into these institutions. If they hadn't broken a law, but they're non-compliant, then they get institutionalized. And so I don't think that we should be conflating the institutions of that time and like actual psychiatric treatment facilities of today's time.
But I'm sure you've heard the narrative that people will say, because they close those things, that's why we have a homeless problem. They say it all the time, like Reagan.
No, we have a homeless problem because we live in a capitalist system. We have a homeless problem because capitalism needs there to be homeless people who are visible and treated poorly, so that there's an unspoken threat of, if you don't do what we say, if you don't take these shitty jobs doing meaningless tasks for hardly anything, for crumbs, if you don't do what we say, that's what happens to you. Now you're on the street. Now you're getting spit on. Now you're getting shot at. That's the threat. That's the coercive nature of capitalism. That's why we already know that it's cheaper to house people than to simply have people out on the streets. And our government won't do it. They won't just house people. Capitalism needs that threat that exists on coercion.
I just looked up when ODD came into the picture, oppositional defiance disorder.
I've taken care of
1980. Isn't that interesting that all of these the institutions for people who were defiant closed down, and then, oh, look, magically now there's this new disorder. Oh, look, it's the same thing. Crazy.
I've actually had a kid, when I did camp counseling, I had a kid who had it. And it was like the only kid who got home because they couldn't guarantee their safety. And like, it was like only a few times the camp had ever done it. It specializes in disabilities. And he was sent home because they couldn't guarantee his safety.
Yeah. So when I was doing psych nursing at that facility, we had the worst of the worst cases of people who were very much a risk to themselves or others, and so those things do exist, but it's going to be very overdiagnosed for people simply not willing to be in lockstep with the status quo. We like to pathologize not following in lockstep and not just like following orders when they don't make sense. And like I mentioned, I'm autistic, and so when I autistically question, well, why do we do it that way? That doesn't make sense. I'm told that I'm oppositional and defiant because I'm asking questions. You're not allowed to ask questions. You're just supposed to do it. And if you ask any questions, you're considered defiant.
That's the capitalist system, though. Follow orders. Yeah. Do what the rich want.
What's funny is like this kid, like I was pretty good. Just you would ask him like, you would give them tasks being like, hey, I need help doing this. Would you like to do it? And they'll always say yes.
It's the orders that they don't like. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so,
or they need to know the reason. If you tell them the reason why, a lot of times they're more willing to do it. But if you just tell them do it and it doesn't make sense.
But anyway, as far as the organizing stuff goes, so people who have nothing, right? They have, say that, like, you hear this excuse all the time. I don't know anyone by me who wants to organize. There's no one like me, right? So square one, what is the basic stuff that you need and the basic attitude that you need to approach it with?
This is going to sound so trite because when I say it, it's like, oh, well, it sounds easy when you say it. We've done it. I did it in multiple cities. We've done it here. You need one other person to draw up documents of your foundation. You need like points of unity, like a mission statement, like why do you exist? What kind of points of unity do you agree on for this group? And then you start finding projects that you want to do. If you want to start out, bringing supplies to homeless people, or if you want to start out with like a reading group, people don't join concepts. They don't want to join in on an idea. You have to start doing it. And then people will see, oh, I want to do that too. And then they will join you. But you're not going to get a bunch of people to say, yeah, let's start a thing. You just have to start it yourself. And I know that's like really cheesy, the full field of dreams thing of like, if you build it, they will come. But that is very true in organizing and activism. You just have to start doing it. And really, you need one other person. And if you message me, you can get a hold of me either Twitter or Instagram. It's anarchitect 918. I don't know if you can spell that because
we'll put
it's
it down below when we put the episode out. It'll be same with the org information and stuff.
If you message me, I will send you all of our charters. That is the full foundation of it. You can put your name on it, make whatever edits you need, and you and one other person can just get started and then get your name out there. Let people see you doing the work, and they will join you. And that has worked for me in 3 different cities over more than a decade.
And it's pretty impressive.
And then also part of that is like stuff that you need as far as like essential supplies and stuff, and not so much the business side. What would you say is something that's on that side of things?
I mean, it depends on what kind of projects you have going. So, for my street medic group, obviously we needed medic supplies, things like bandages and tourniquets and, wound care things and cold packs and, cases of water, things like that. But, if you're doing a reading group, you really just kind of need access to the internet because you can do all that reading online. Most of the stuff that we go over with in our current 2 reading groups is we're getting that off of the anarchist library online. So we don't actually need physical supplies for that. We do have the land rematriation project, which is like an indigenous concept. I don't know if y'all are familiar with.
Oh, no. It's huge where I am. Okay. We actually, cool. So we actually have we're kind of like in Oklahoma in a certain regard in that aspect, is that like I have a lot of friends who have, been here a long time, longer than my family,
Yeah. So, well, for that one, for, land rematriation, that requires a ton of supplies. That's the thing that we end up spending the most money on currently. We bought equipment, and we bought a shipping container to put on the land to put the equipment in and the tools. We spent money getting water run out there because we can't grow a garden without water. We're looking into getting electricity run out there next so that we're not depending on a generator for our electric tools. So those things cost a ton of money, but we have been doing community fundraising, and a lot of people from all over the U.S. end up donating either as an ongoing pledge every month or just a one-time thing. So it just depends on the project, what you're doing as far as what kind of supplies you might need. Manpower, definitely manpower hours. We need people with time and dedication.
Yeah, it's the most precious resource.
So, like, what are some basic? Sorry.
Yeah.
What are some basic let's say like techniques, that like the average person can have if they don't have any like medical training. How can they assist someone who is a medic, or maybe, like if their friend gets hurt, even like what are some basic first aid principles and things? And then maybe tell people where they can read more.
You can go and get CPR and rescue breathing training through, I actually don't like the Red Cross, but you can get it free through them. And various cities have other places where you can get get a little certificate, be certified in first aid for free. Also, Stop the Bleed training. I'm a registered instructor for Stop the Bleed, and I think I'm the only one here. And they actually just started a new online program where if you can't find someone in your area in person to go into the class for them to do hands-on training, which I highly recommend doing hands-on training, then you can do their online. But more than anything, I think you don't need to be a medic to keep an individual first aid kit. I keep one with me everywhere, all over the place. We're in a well-armed area of the U.S., and I don't go anywhere without my individual first aid kit, which has things like tourniquets, gauze. So I've got two tourniquets. I've got this, which is a face shield for giving rescue breathing and not having to put your mouth on somebody. Titanium shears. Where's my hyphen vent? Oh yeah, this handy dandy. This is duct tape. Very handy. Not shine it. This is gauze. It's compressed gauze, very thin, and it's in Z-pack form. This is so good for packing wounds and compression, but I also have rolled gauze in here. Quick clot gauze, which is impregnated with a clay that stops bleeding quickly. And then where's my hyphen vent? So it's just a chest seal, and these would be used for bullet gunshot wounds.
Okay. Is that just the big sheets that get put over before the gauze? Is that what that is?
It's a small sheet. It's like this, and honestly, you don't even need those. You can make things. But this has a one-way venting system where air can get out, but it can't get in, and that way you don't get air into the internal cavity.
Interesting.
Because that can actually cause someone to suffocate from getting too much air into the area outside of the lungs and inside the chest cavity. But if you don't have that, you can use I could use this piece of plastic and just tape down 3 sides of it, and it'll do the same thing. It'll let air out of the one side that's not taped down and won't let air in. But it's nice to have a hyphen vent if you can. Luckily, I have some generous people who keep me well supplied.
It's always good to have.
There, literally says on the package there for you. Yeah, there's it without the shine and up close. How accessible is the training to use something like this?
I think that to get more extensive training, so I offer more extensive training here for beyond first aid. So when I train people, I'm training them on how to respond to things like traumatic head injuries and, fractures and gunshot wounds and all kinds of things that most first aid and Stop the Bleed isn't going to teach you. But I do know that the wilderness medical response training, those are really good. Even if you're not going to be in the wilderness, even if you're in an urban setting, you're downtown in the streets and something crazy happens, the skills that they teach for the wilderness survival, those medical skills come in very handy. Because not every city is going to have somebody like me that's going to have a course to teach people what to do if somebody, has their skull cracked.
I just wanted to touch on, even just for people we could call, we could say underdeveloped people or low income people around you. You give them access to first aid and medicine that they're maybe not insured for, or, it's an access issue with America's medical system, which we haven't gotten into yet.
Yeah, one of the big essays that I'm writing is on how capitalism has destroyed medical advancements and turned it into an industry, thanks to Reagan, who created the HMO law that said that now medical can be for profit, whereas previously it couldn't be for profit. And now it's been absolutely destroyed. You know, you go to a doctor, you've got like 7 minutes to talk about what's going on, and they really just treat the symptoms until you go away. Or you go, you know, to a specialist who really can only tell you anything about that one specific body part system. And if it's a system-wide issue, they're not going to know what the fuck to do. So really the only thing that I do is things like, you know, people will come to me for like wound care a lot of times because they've hurt themselves really badly, and they're like, I got a really bad cut and I can't afford to go and get stitches, and like, you know, I've got suture kits, I've got the zip stitch, I've got, you know, staple, the surgical staples if somebody needs help with that, because otherwise, you know, here in the US, of course, you know, one big gash in your leg and you're bankrupt. You know, you're in debt for life now.
We're soft, fleshy creatures.
And another big one is when you are working with homeless folks. You know, they get these like minor injuries, but they don't have, you know, just a simple abrasion or just a little cut, and they don't have access to like clean water and soap to be like washing these little minor injuries that then get very infected, and then they get septic because they don't have a way to go to a doctor, and then they end up dying from very simple things that if you just were to give them supplies to wash and keep it dry and bandaged and some little packets of antibiotic ointment, you know, you can avoid somebody dying from like just a cut on their leg.
Well, it's funny because the episode that we just released, the guy that we spoke to spoke about this as well, but in more of an operator context, where it's like if you don't cut your toenails, you can cut yourself on your toe, and then your foot goes septic, and you're screwed.
That's another thing. That's a major thing whenever you're working in like homeless encampments. A lot of people we have very disproportionately high number of people with diabetes in the US, and with that comes you have to be extremely careful with foot care, because there's not a lot of blood flow to the extremities, and so we would do foot care, in which you kind of have to have a medical professional to do diabetic foot care, because yes, it will get infected from one little injury, one little cut, and you end up now you don't have a leg.
It just continuing on with healthcare. Obviously, the limitations is like cost and things like that. What are other ways that we can mitigate that without making sure? It's like, you know, the thing where it's like, oh, what do we have to do to keep schools safe? Put armed guards everywhere. You know, we can't have street medics on every corner, right? So
that's not true. That's not true. You can have street medics on every corner. Now, I'm going to say this. I am not a fan of Mao at all. Dislike the guy. But he had a program called the Barefoot Doctors. And that program was, you know, him realizing we don't have enough medical professionals for the number of people we have. And so the Barefoot Doctors were people who worked and lived in the community as just regular, you know, they were farmers, they were like daycare workers, but they also got medical training in how to treat basic, you know, basic medical issues that didn't necessarily need a doctor, but needed somebody who knew what they were doing. So, you know, if you have a wound that needs packing, you're going to need someone who knows how to sterilize things, someone who knows how to pack things and how to bandage it properly. But that program, the Barefoot Doctor program, made it so that, yes, there is a medic on every corner. And it's, you know, taking the authority out of medicine and really making it a more popular thing for everyone to have knowledge of. But we don't really do patient education here. And if we did start doing that, which that's why education is a huge part of what I do, so that other people can then go on and have that knowledge that I have. I'm not keeping it to myself. I want other people to know how to do what I do.
I mean, that's basically what how I was trying to lead you into the question is talk about programs instead of like government solutions anyway. So that's basically how you answered it.
Yeah. Unfortunately, Barefoot Doctors was a government program, but
yeah, but you're obviously saying it in a different way. We don't need it with government. We got you.
I'm the one doing it now.
So you think you're of the approach that a medic should be on every corner, but I wanted to also say that you look at a lot of stuff as societies form and how groups form like naturally without interference from government, cities, all this stuff. And these types of societies, normally you'll have like there's a woman who handles all the childbirth in the village, right?
Yeah.
And like sometimes she'll also like have certain like medical stuff, right? So a lot of times you have villages form around one person who can have individual care to each of those people, even though obviously it's just not as advanced as we have today, but you get the point.
So yeah, I think that, knowledge hoarding, as I would call it, I think that's like wrong. I think that's people wanting to keep themselves in business, because if you're a midwife or a doula, I'm a full spectrum doula certified, and I'm always wanting to teach everyone what I know, because the more people that know it, the better. I'm not trying to monetize it. I'm not trying to capitalize on it. And so I'm not that midwife that's out there not telling everybody how to birth some babies. That knowledge needs to be widespread. But that was the point with the Barefoot Doctors, is that that wasn't their sole job. It was just additional knowledge that they had within the community. And there were lots of people within the community that had that knowledge and still went to work as a farmer every day, and still went and were a school teacher every day, but they also still had medical knowledge.
Commenting on what you said, that the medics make people feel safer. I think journalists do have a role there as well, because they think that as if somebody's filming them, they're not going to do this fucked up shit.
Well, yes. And recently in the US, we have whole campaigns of film the police, but in what we're kind of seeing what's going on in Gaza, but of course Israel has cut off all communication. They've cut off internet. They've cut off electric supply, any kind of landline communication. And so what I witnessed was when those communication lines went down, when people who had previously been live posting or streaming, when they suddenly went dark, absolute panic, because we all just knew that they're about to just flatten that entire region. They just shut the lights out. They just turned off the cameras. We know what's about to happen, and it's absolutely terrifying.
And the worst part is that Israel gave them their Hunger Games map that they can only access through the internet.
Where it was like,
so that's pretty cool. So not only did they give them, hey, we're going to bomb you on these spots, now you can't access it, so now you don't know. Fuck yourself.
Yeah.
So that's pretty cool. Good work, Israel.
But Hamas always had their command network, so they would tell people where they're going to bomb, and Hamas would be able to move, so they would just kill civilians. Isn't that great? Great plan, Israel.
They're being extremely effective, unfortunately, and it's gut-wrenching to not be able to do anything about it from here.
It really is.
That's one of the hardest things as a journalist who has worked overseas, is I always would justify because I was basically making money by filming people die. And to justify and cope with that, I would say that I was making a difference, because these crimes being visible to people would change things. When I finally accepted that nothing was going to change and nobody has any power to stop this, and it's rests solely on specific people. I look at Armenia right now. You could say that sure, the US could step in and just get in the way and start a war with Azerbaijan to stop it. You could say that theoretically could happen.
In theory, sure.
Yeah, but realistically, that's Russia's imperial territory, and they'll get mad about it, and they'll start killing people elsewhere if they do that.
Yeah, the US is only going to intervene if it has a direct benefit to us. This is why the US is supporting Israel, because Israel is our one ally over there. And Joe Biden is on record decades ago saying, even if there wasn't an Israel,
he's also on record that he hates Netanyahu, though.
That doesn't matter. I don't care how he feels about Netanyahu.
That's the thing is that's how a lot of Israeli protesters right now. They may be like total fascists, but they hate Netanyahu, and so like people who are protesting him, and it's like at least it's something for me.
It is something.
He said over the top. That's better than nothing.
I care less about the individuals sitting in the driver's seat than I care about the system that allows a driver's seat for them to be in. Because if we, if we don't take down the system and we just take down Netanyahu, there's going to be somebody else to fill that seat and keep driving the machine.
And that's kind of like every like actual like rational like left-wing activists in Israel's point about what's going on.
Yeah, the whole system has to be taken down. The machine has to be taken down.
Yeah,
they're just going to replace the head.
We certainly have. I mean, I have three. I did 3 streams when the war broke out. Not at the ground invasion. It was leading up to the ground invasion. So I did one after October 7th, and like I was like, oh, if the ground invasion happens, we'll probably not like we'll cover the beginning of it, but then we're not going to really like because I don't like focusing on like certain stuff where like I think there's better people doing better work there, like journalists on the ground and stuff. Yeah. So, and I don't know, it just makes me feel weird, like I'm milking it for profit. Like there's not much more that I could add. We did 3 entire streams with experts just to talk about leading up to the ground invasion and what would happen and the results that could happen. And then I do updates every now and then. So, that's all we talked about was getting rid of the whole system. I said it in all 3 of those.
Do we want to finish on gender?
We can sure go ahead. You have a question about gender?
More specifically around the
pronouns.
No, more the attacks upon the LGBT community, specifically trans. How do we think?
Easier to be
how
like.
We,
how like it was easier to be trans in 2017 than it is now.
Well, there's
like
been
how do we stop this?
I think so. I'm only vaguely aware of the issues existing in Australia and recent laws where, like, even against like drag queens, which have existed for decades and decades in Australia, and
it's
now
so funny. The drag queens in Australia is so funny because Dame Edna is like a thing here and was a peak idol in Australia for like 40 years. Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, is from Australia. Right, all of these fucking movies, all of this culture from Australia exists, and
Australia just copies our fascism.
And from what I can see, Australia celebrated these people, these entertainers, which I don't really count them as being gender queer. If it is indeed a performance, gender is something that's internal. I'm gender queer. I'm not cis. I very much look just like a cis woman, but I'm not. People are kinder to me when I look like a cis woman now. But it's an internal thing, and it doesn't really matter like what you wear. So I wouldn't really consider I would consider drag queens to be tangential to gender queer issues, but obviously they are targeted just as well because other people conflate the same thing as but
I don't know the difference.
I think it's extremely dangerous in the US right now. We have laws in Florida where it is legal for the government to come in and kidnap the children who are trans or children of parents who are trans. And they've written in laws that are so vaguely stated that they say that anyone who like trans as a kid is committing child abuse, and that can be punishable by up to death, by capital punishment. And they've worded it so vaguely that even using a child's correct pronouns, is considered extreme child abuse, where the state can come in and take your kids, and people are fleeing, and that shit's happening here too. But we're talking about like they're setting up to start executing trans people. And I think that I mentioned trans people specifically because that seems to be the main target right now. It's almost like the government and fascists have kind of turned their eye away from gay people to trans people. And now not only is it like, keep it to yourself, now it's like, we are actually going to kill you for being trans.
Well, what I think, just to like kind of expand on exactly what you're saying, is what I think is that they looked at statistics and they realized that they don't have to be the ones who, so to speak, pull the trigger. You know, it's like their problem that they see they can take care of them themselves if they make these deaths happen. It's putting the people who are trans in a situation where they don't want to continue living.
Right.
It's stochastic terrorism.
We see people all the time actively encouraging trans people to join the 41% or whatever. I see those comments all the time. But also just creating an extremely hostile environment where people feel like there's no way out, nothing's going to get better, and it's honestly, it's terrifying, and it's just gut wrenching for me. I'm luckily able to present in a way where only other queer people look at me and they're like, hello, fellow queer. But cis people look at me and they'll just see what to them is like, oh, that's just a woman. And I'm lucky in that sense, but I don't really have another choice. I live in Oklahoma. It's just it's not safe to be visibly queer or trans here. And just like, not, and I hate to break Godwin's law, but even in Nazi Germany, and they had the brown shirts, which was neighbors reporting neighbors, or neighbors becoming the unofficial police. And so now we've got laws that protect people, the trans panic laws that protect people who murder trans people. And so now the state doesn't even have to do it. The state doesn't have to do the killing. They can just sanction, modern day brown shirts to do their killing for them.
Yeah. Because there's the Red Guards in China did that too. The students went around executing people. As I said before, it is literal stochastic terrorism, and I would say that the libs of TikTok and Ben Shapiro are some of the chief people responsible for this.
We've had so many bomb threats here in Oklahoma at schools, at public schools, because of whatever her name is, Chaya something.
And now libs of TikTok, we don't have to acknowledge her name.
And now she's been hired on with the Board of Education for Oklahoma. Like they liked that she got bomb threats sent to us so much that they decided to hire her. That's just unfathomable to me.
That's actually revolting.
And then also just recently, Florida, you can't update your gender on your driver's license. I'm not sure, they might have passed it, or they're talking about passing. So,
multiple states, and it's now they're basically saying that it's a criminal offense of fraud, which can be a felony, which means it is the end of your free life. Not necessarily because you're in prison, but now you can't rent an apartment. Now you can't get credit. Now you can't get a loan. You can't get hired at most jobs.
And
which that's another issue as well.
People kind of equate it to the 90s panic where they didn't want to watch SpongeBob because SpongeBob made kids gay. There was that type of panic in the 90s as well, where it's like, you can't show gay people on TV. But it's like, no, this is like anti-sodomy laws level. This is so far back.
This is like Hays Code shit.
I'm pretty sure I got gayed up from watching Elvira, Mistress of the Dark. And I was like, is that my goth mommy? I was gay from that point forward. And she was not. She has since come out as being gay, but nobody knew that until very recently.
Go for it.
And
but
so I didn't know what gay was when I started having crushes on girls. I didn't know what gay was. I'd never heard that term. I'd never heard homosexuality. Nobody gayed me. It just happened.
Interesting. But I mean, I feel like that's maybe not these days. I feel like that's just how it was, though. It's just something that you realized one day, or maybe it was when you were 40 years old and 10 years into a marriage, and you're like,
I mean, when
shit.
did you realize that you liked women?
I think I had my first girlfriend and I was,
Me? I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay.
When did you realize that women were your thing? You know, it's just like it's there.
I honestly can't even like pinpoint it.
Exactly. That's my thing. So I think a lot of it is just like this whole like I think they believed in conversion camps, but I think they've accepted that that doesn't work. But they just literally want to make you feel abnormal.
Work, but the cruelty and the punishment is the point of it.
Yeah.
What
They
if
just want to make people feel abnormal.
Voluntarily do it.
How you feel. They want to force you to perform cis heteronormativity, and if you can effectively perform cis heteronormativity, then they'll leave you alone. If you're not able to, perform cis heteronormativity, then you're fucked, and they're going to try to either kill you or make you kill yourself, or they're just going to brutalize and oppress you until you just disappear.
Yeah. So what's the path forward? How do you think people should work together to counter this?
For one, everyone needs to realize that, I don't know if you're familiar with the term, hierarchy, which is the intersection of all forms of authoritarian oppression. So this includes sexism, homophobia, transphobia, racism, all of these forms of oppression. This is all one interlocking system, and all of it upholds all of it. And we can't just be reductionist and just focus on one thing, because it's very literally true that if anyone anywhere is oppressed, then we are all at risk. Because what they do is they go one by one with these weakest classes and then move on to everyone else. So for one, we need to realize that your fight is our fight, and our fight is your fight. But we need to be building dual power. We need to be prefiguring, building the new and the shell of the old, which means creating the systems that we want to live in. Regardless, I'm no longer begging the government to create a world that I want to live in. I'm going to create my own world, and then the government's going to have to fucking fight me. And I think we're doing pretty well so far. I think we're on our way. If you look at community, you look at territories like Chiapas. There's a lot of places in Mexico, but I think the Zapatistas in Chiapas, they are the longest running sovereign region of land. They've been going for 25 years. Their revolution started 75 years ago, and they've had autonomy for 25 of those years now. It is possible, but we can't just sit around waiting for the revolution to come. Like, it's fucking happening. And you know what? It's not as snazzy as you think. It's not going to be all, pomp and circumstance and bombs and everything going off. No, it's me fucking stapling zines at 2:30 in the morning on my own time with my own fucking money to educate people on how we can come together as a community and build our own world and stop wasting our energy begging the government to do something that it's never going to do.
All right.
That is our only way forward, to build our own.
Great. We'll end it there. That's fantastic. That's a perfect ending.
Through the years, America has stood as the world symbol for law and order. Anarchy, well, that was something that was always happening in other countries. Newsworthy, perhaps, but it could never happen here. The policeman on the corner has traditionally been looked upon as a friend, not as the instrument of a tyrant. People in other countries had just reasons to riot against their governments. The nations of the world are dictatorships in one form or another. Through the years, America has stood as the world symbol for law and order. Anarchy, well, that was something that was always happening in other countries. Newsworthy, perhaps, but it could never happen here. The policeman on the corner has traditionally been looked upon as a friend, not as the instrument of a tyrant. People in other countries had just reasons to riot against their governments. The nations of the world are dictatorships in one form or another.